Louise, thank you for joining me on the Mindful podcast.
My pleasure. Sorry, I'm just laughing at my own intro earlier.
You were worried that there was something on your jumper?
Yes, there's a few dog snots on my jumper. Yeah, but it's dried in, as you helpfully pointed out.
Yeah. Well, that's the great thing about dog snot as opposed to dog hair, is that the snot will soak in. There's great soakage in it.
It's true. It's true. Yes.
We want to talk about happiness and
Yes.
how happiness is sold to us, the idea of it. What do you think is kind of the biggest happiness trap?
I think I think the trap, as I see it, is that we're sold a two-dimensional image of what it is to be happy. And we are swimming in two-dimensional images of what happiness looks like. And it's incomparable to the human experience day to day.
Yeah, do you think there's been a fork in the road? What actually makes us happy and what people say or think makes us happy? And I think with social media, that image has been projected more and more of look, these are the things that should and could make you happy, but are they aligned to what we know in our hearts make us happy?
You know, I would even question that whether we do fundamentally know it in our hearts what makes us happy. I think that that's how far away from that core path that we've become. Because if your life is inundated with pictures of other things all day long, with other people's stories all day long, then we do become disconnected from who and what we are and what we want. And sometimes, I mean, even as a child moving into teenage years, I even say this about myself, I felt like up until I was in my 30s, I had sort of tripped and fallen into the next thing, right? Rather than being autonomous about my choices. So moving along, oh yeah, okay, I'll do that. So almost like an external force was pulling me into different things in my life. And I was searching and searching and searching for the thing that was going to feel good.
Yeah.
And that was going to feel like it was me. And of course, that didn't happen until I went inwards and figured out who I actually was, because I was responding to the image I thought other people wanted me to be for such a long time. But it's also what I encounter in so many other people as well.
Yeah, so do you find that people come to you disillusioned because what they thought was going to make them happy hasn't?
Yes, that has happened. And there's a couple of cases I can think of in my mind. One of which, a person, and she became exceptionally successful in what she wanted since she was a kid.
Yeah.
And it was actually in the music industry as well. And hit the high point, to the point where she was offered multiple record deals in the States and turned them down and flew back home and scratched her head and then wondered what she was going to do next.
See, for people who would be looking in from the outside on that story would be like, what? Are you mad? That's happiness. That's success. Multiple record deals, America, music, performance. It's hitting all those hot buttons.
And it's what you wanted since you were a kid.
But I guess when it was presented to her in that final finish line form, it was maybe the first time she was forced to think of that scary question, oh my God, what do I actually want?
Yeah. Yes. And what am I sacrificing to do this? Because at this point now in my life, I've already created a life to a certain extent. And maybe I wasn't focusing on it being the thing that I loved because I was sort of hell-bent on this future aspiration. But in the meantime, I was actually building a life. And now in order to adhere to this aspiration and do it and commit to it, I have to sacrifice the life I've built. And actually, I don't think I want to do that now.
Is happiness tied to the software that we're running? Maybe that feeling that, oh my God, this isn't what I wanted. Is it possible that, say, for instance, using this client as an example, so at some point in her life, the software that was running in her mind was, I want to be the greatest musician ever and I want to go to America. And those seeds were planted then. But as you say, over time, maybe as her life changed and developed, she needed new software for that stage of her life. And the problem was the old one was pushing her towards America, but actually to keep hammering the software analogy, that she needed an upgrade that was more aligned to who she was at this part of her life.
Yes. So I think that there are multiple moments in anyone's life, if they stay curious, where they hit this really challenging crossroads. And in that crossroads, there's a choice between continuing on the same path that you have committed to and wanted, maybe in a dreamlike way. You wanted this to happen in your lifetime when you're an adult. Maybe the first time it happens, it feels like that, right? And to do something different feels like you failed. It feels like a failure.
Yeah.
It feels like you're giving up if you move towards something else, especially if this has been a dream for most of your life.
Yeah, you maybe feel like you're doing a disservice to that version of you that was trying so hard for years to make it happen.
You might call yourself a coward. So you start to actually have a conversation with yourself and be quite denigrating of yourself because this thing doesn't seem as alluring anymore, or you don't seem as driven towards it anymore. So you call yourself names instead. Well, that must be the reason. I'm just being a coward. I'm just being fearful about it. But in actual fact, true emotional health is flexibility. It's the ability to actually tap into, in what ways have my values changed? You posed it perfectly in your question. But if we don't stay in contact with what matters to us as we grow and evolve and different people come into our lives and we have different experiences, it moves the scales. And if we don't stay in contact with that, we continue on the same path, kind of with that pickaxe, trying to and the wall gets stronger and thicker and we don't know why we're not getting through it. But it's because actually what matters to us has changed and we've missed it.
But also staying flexible, staying open to the idea that your idea of happiness might change over time goes against a lot of the stuff that's sold to us, again, on social media so much. It's all about, are you driven? Are you focused? Are you willing to do anything to go after your dreams? It's about sacrifices and discipline, and in that context, waking up and going, I'm not so sure I want to do this anymore, doesn't seem to fit in. Now you're like, hey, stay on point, get after it, quitter.
Yes.
So there's that kind of angry success narrative doesn't have much room for that flexibility, it seems.
That's true. And you know what, and again, coming back to the two-dimensional world of what we're sold, right, is that actually we are beings that are really deep and we're messy and we're chaotic and our emotions run so deep-rooted into who and what we are and what we want, and none of that is reflected in what we're sold. Because we're sold a very binary picture of what's good and bad, right or wrong, hero and villain. And it is locking us inside this picture of what we should and shouldn't be. And it's dishonest. It's a dishonest narrative about the human heart. And it's crushing us. It's actually crushing our spirit, I think.
And from a young age too, what's your experience working with younger people who maybe are hitting that sort of mid to late teens, young adult phase and going, oh my God, I don't think I belong in any of this?
Yeah. And I think, and this is where the nuance comes into it. Okay? Because if we only focus on being happy, well, we're going to eschew and push away anything that makes us feel uncomfortable. And if we push away everything that makes us feel uncomfortable, then we're never going to be exposed to life in a way that's going to strengthen our capability to be in it, to exist in it. So in effect, we weaken our ability to be in the world by not facing things that make us uncomfortable and pushing through it. More and more and more that I do this work, I'm settling on the idea, which might change in a few years' time, but at the moment I'm settling on the idea that courage and boldness are actually two of the most important things, or it's really the same concept, one of the most important things to have that we do not talk about enough. We talk about safety and security, and that's important. But staying behind the walls of safety and security and refusing to be in any situation that's uncomfortable is weakening us. And if we're a teenager and we're given the message that it's okay to push away anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, guess what? we are never going to develop the skills to be in the world.
Mm.
We're not going to develop the skills to negotiate and navigate conflict. We're not going to develop the skills to be in relationship when it gets tough. But relationship when it gets tough is the thing that deepens it, the thing that provokes intimacy, the thing that actually gives us a sense of belonging.
Where is
Happiness.
it coming from? Where is this message to younger people in particular that they should push away everything that's uncomfortable? Is there our parenting?
You know, there's a great social psychologist, Jonathan Haidt. He talks extensively about this. And he said in the early 2000s it all started to change. And it was the idea of the culture of safety. And actually that because obviously we love our children and you know, we care deeply about our children and their safety, that anything that looked threatening was shut down, even though on average the world became a safer place to be in. But actually our idea that it was less safe went up. And
I also blame insurance companies.
Well, yeah.
Anything that isn't covered in bubble wrap and
that's right.
You know, wishes that it's instantly shut down. Like look at playgrounds, anything to climb on is taken out.
Exactly that. Even that particular, yes, it was taken out of playgrounds because it was an insurance or somebody was going to claim because the child got a little bit more hurt than they ideally should have gotten hurt. But he talks about young people needing to be hurt, needing to feel some injury. I mean, not extensive injury, but needing to understand again how to be in the world. Well, if I do this, this and this, that's going to cause me to tumble and I'm going to hurt my knee. If I'm protected from learning that, I have weakened my ability to be in the world. We are, he calls us anti-fragile, meaning we have to be exposed to risk and danger in order to strengthen our ability to exist. And if we remove all those things, then we are creating fragile individuals.
So is happiness tied into resilience then and overcoming hardships and being okay with discomfort? Does happiness come from being okay with not being happy for parts of our life?
Yes. Yeah, it's a good way of phrasing it. I see happiness in two ways, okay? They're not necessarily related at first blush as I talk about them, right? And I'll talk about the first one maybe after this. In order to navigate your way through life and to pursue dreams, goals, to stand up for what matters to you, happiness cannot be your target. Happiness is transient by its very nature, and it's something that arises out of what you've chosen to do. Fulfillment is a much better target. So what are you going to do in your life that's going to bring you to a place where you feel like you've done the thing that you're meant to do? And out of that typically arises happiness. But if happiness is the goal, the chances are you're going to avoid anything that makes you feel uncomfortable.
Can you be fulfilled and not necessarily happy at the same time? Is that tying your brain in knots? I'm trying to think.
No, it's a good question, but
if I use myself as an example, the last year has been really interesting for me because I left the radio and I embarked on this new way of working and living and all that. There are times when I feel unhappy, like I'm struggling, but I feel fulfilled. So I'll have days where I feel like my bucket is full because I've been doing things that I really am engaged with and I want to do. But I don't necessarily feel like, yay, like there's lambs and little baby deers jumping around me. I'm fine some days challenging, but it's fulfilling.
Yeah.
So if someone would say, are you happy right now? I'd be like, I'm not so sure. Are you fulfilled? Actually, I am. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And it sort of feeds into the two dimensions of happiness that I'm thinking about right now. Right?
Okay.
So the first one is, yes, you can be fulfilled and not feel happy. The lambs jumping around and the joy, that's joy, but it's joy. It's an emotion. Emotions are fleeting. If you're fulfilled, you've got to, correct now, tell me if you feel like this too, right? The feeling of fulfillment is a solid grounded, expansive inner feeling of
Yes.
just, it's anchored, it's connectedness. It's a sense that you're in the place that you're supposed to be in. And if you spent years of your life not being in the place that you're supposed to be in, then you know the difference. And if you were to measure that by happiness, you might give up on that. Oh, well, I don't have this happiness, so I shouldn't do that. But you know what the alternative is feeling so off kilter, so out of touch with who and what you are. And that's certainly not going to bring about happiness. But in a state of fulfillment, things are going to be tough. Not everybody gets or does what they want because it's really uncomfortable to try and do it, to push through the barriers, to push through the obstacles. And again, happiness will arise at different points.
Well, I love that. So happiness is an indicator of things, but it's not necessarily the be all and end all. What about a happiness in relationships and our ideas of happiness, say, within a romantic relationship? Do you get people coming to you who are like, harumph, he's not doing this or that, or she's not doing this, and this isn't what I signed up for, who have a false idea of what it really means to be happy in a relationship?
I think something that we're sold, bearing in mind we are assaulted with pieces of information and instruction on a daily basis about how to live. And one of those...
Everyone's a goddamn expert. Comedians becoming meditation teachers, God's sake.
Exactly.
But it is coming from everywhere.
Yeah. I contribute to it. I do it too. I put information out about relationships. It's all noise to a certain extent, right?
Yeah.
And the other downside to it is that if we are constantly locked inside thinking about what it is to be in a relationship and rationalizing and figuring it out and ticking the 10 boxes of if somebody's toxic or not, and figuring out what gaslighting looks like. It's not that these things aren't important to a certain extent, especially in some types of relationships, but we're so locked inside the thought of what it is to be in a successful or healthy relationship that we've stopped feeling. And we've stopped actually communicating from a place of heart. Rather, we get really distracted by what we think it should look like.
Yeah.
And what love should look like, even. And it doesn't look like that, so therefore it's not love. Therefore you're taking advantage or taking the piss, or right? And this other person's going, what? And I often see that. This other person has no clue what's going on in your mind. But in your mind, you have travelled hundreds of miles along a certain thread or storyline about what you think is happening in this relationship from their perspective. And they had no part in that. That's your story.
Do people go into you sometimes expecting you to be, amen, girl, or right on, you're so right. Your partner is an idiot and a selfish so-and-so. And are some people taken aback from time to time when you go, hang on, you've, as you say, traveled quite far there in your own mind, and maybe everything you're thinking isn't actually grounded in reality. Do they go,
sometimes.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is often I see relief on their faces when I confront them with that.
Okay.
And I think that relief is born out of, oh, okay, this might not be as toxic as I've led my own self to believe.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying there aren't instances where there are emotionally abusive relationships. Of course there are. And I've worked with them too. But in the day-to-day, I will say the majority of relationships, right? Often the ones that I see that come to me get coloured by the idea of what they think it should be and get lost inside of that rather than actually showing up in what it actually is with each other.
Where are they getting this idea of what it should be? I don't want to put everything on social media, but is it just the world or
podcasts? I mean, hello, here we are talking about it. But, there's a whole range of podcasts and thoughts and ideas. And again, I think podcasts are better because it's long form and we have a chance to actually finish a sentence. Right?
Yeah, there's a bit of there's room for nuance in there. Yeah.
And we put it into context and we put it in an environment and we give examples. And that's useful. But again, remember that the person listening can only hear to the level of their own ability to understand and to take it in, and or even their emotional willingness to take in what they're hearing.
So they might a la carte it and just take the bits that is resonating or
Exactly that.
fitting their own storyline.
We hear things the way we are. We don't hear it the way it is. And we bring that back as though, we have a military behind us now on our side and you're in the wrong. So it's not a guarantee that what we say is going to land in the correct way. And working through that with an individual is one thing. I do always believe in compassionately and empathically confronting somebody so that I can get to the bottom of what's actually going on, right? From if it's not with both parties, with that one person.
Is that difficult if someone comes into you and they're like, I am not happy in this scenario. So-and-so is doing these awful things to me and this person is horrible and this happened, and you have to take them at their word. You don't know them. How do you filter through what they're saying and go, maybe there's more to this, as you say. I haven't heard the other sides, people's sides of the story. How do you discern whether this person is coming to you just for reassurance, of their world view, or whether you can actually, how do you cut through and say, oh, actually, maybe everything isn't as it seems here?
Yeah. Well, firstly, their experience is valid regardless of the objective truth in the middle. Their experience is incredibly valid. And in a setting like that, if I'm working with them, then that is paramount initially, right? Because you're bringing to me not just what you're experiencing now, but you're bringing your history to me. You're bringing everything that you've been through right up until this point. And that feeds into how you see this. That feeds into how you're showing up with your partner or your family or whoever it might be. So all of this is really relevant, and how you feel is really relevant. So, only at the point where there's trust, does it become safe enough for them to go deeper on that one and to actually look at how they show up, right? Because, I always come back to this, Dermot. Everybody wants to feel seen in the world.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, we see that to an extortionate amount online. Yeah. But actually, if you peel back all those layers, at its very core, it's just a need to feel seen.
Yeah.
And feel like you matter. And if somebody feels like they don't matter to somebody, there's a couple of ways of coping with that. One, you just retreat into yourself and you become smaller and smaller and smaller and quieter and quieter and quieter. But the other is you inflate yourself and you find issue with everything and you complain about everything and your voice gets louder and there's always something to moan about. It's the same thing. If you peel back the layers, there's a wish underneath that. There's a need underneath that. And usually that need is to be seen and to feel like you matter, whether it's to your partner or to your friends. But the problem, of course, is that this is the self-sabotage that kicks in. Because if you're on that other side, and the other one to a certain extent, but if you're on the inflating, complaining, loud, obnoxious side of it, well, people are going to pull back from you. And that's going to confirm your view that other people are not to be trusted. But you don't see how you're doing it. You don't see how you're showing up and causing it. You only see the other person pulling back from you. And that's the thing to short circuit in a therapeutic environment. But it takes time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. If someone is listening and they're just feeling unhappy, from all the people that you see, and I know you don't have the answer to happiness, or you wouldn't be sitting here talking to me, you'd be living in a mansion somewhere, counting your money. But what would you advise people to do, or where to start? I mean, it's a big question, I know, but how do we move ourselves out of a place of, in air quotes, unhappiness and start to move in the direction of maybe towards that fulfillment you spoke about?
Something that's just come into my mind as you asked that, Dermot, is I listened to an interview. This is going to sound a bit like I'm diverting, but bear with me. I listened to an interview with Nick Cave and Krista Tippett. I think it was quite recent. And obviously he lost two of his sons.
Yeah.
Tragically. And something he said in that interview was, this is going to sound like the antithesis of happiness, but he said, there's nothing like grief to bring you close to the essence of things. And that has stayed with me ever since, because and I bet you felt it too. Maybe you felt it by yourself. Maybe you felt it when you've spoken to other people who are grieving. Everything is peeled back. There's nothing covering them or concealing them or hiding them anymore. They're completely there. They're completely raw. They're exactly as they are. And everything that doesn't matter has fallen away. And they see through the bullshit.
Yeah.
And there's something, even though it's the antithesis of happiness, in fact, he would probably argue it's the root of happiness. Not that you need to experience grief in order to get there, but that it's an interesting way of seeing through to it, through grief, because you are connected to the essence of things, to what really matters in your life. And all this noise that we're surrounded by, and all this colourful way of existing, and all this hyper productivity, and how to be better, and how to look better, right? And how to be stronger, how to be more successful, how to sell more, how to have more friends, how to have better relationships. We lose ourselves and we stop knowing ourselves.
Yeah. I spoke about that a little bit in my intro, about just how the image of success and happiness has changed over the years. Just taking TV adverts as an example, that it was, having lots and lots of leisure time, free time, showed that you were wealthy, successful. You didn't have to work. That was other people's stuff.
Yeah, burden.
Yeah. Now the image of success and happiness is getting after it, it's the business person running from the boardroom to the limo, never off the phone, getting that deal closed, sleeping 4 hours a night and celebrating that.
The hustle.
Yeah. The grind culture. That's what we're all part of now. Do you find people coming to you disillusioned that this productivity model of happiness just isn't working for them?
Maybe, but I'm not even sure that things are adding up yet, because we're so immersed in this.
Yeah.
And some, as you were speaking there, I was thinking, isn't it funny that actually we're escalating our hustle so intensively, and meanwhile AI is going to by 2045, it's just going to be the most intelligent. We will not even come close to how intelligent that's going to be. And yet we're still trucking away to, be the best that we can possibly be. And meanwhile, this is silently taking over.
Our laptop will just talk to us one morning and say, do you know what? I'll take it from here.
Yeah, you just stay there.
Yeah.
I got this.
Yeah. But also, I guess the irony of that, we get wrapped up in the hustle and the grind, and we go, go, go. And you go, well, what are we doing all this for? And it's like, well, rest is weak. Leisure time, that's a sign you're a quitter. We want to be, it's all about productivity. Well, where are we going with this? Well, we're going to do this so that we can retire and do nothing. But you just said that's not very valuable. Well, I'll work it out when I get there. We're pushing with so much effort towards an ideal that we've already poo-pooed as being not very valid.
Yeah. And this is where something you said earlier is really relevant. And it's knowing yourself and knowing your own values. And what becomes really difficult there is when you do identify your values and they're contrary to what society's peddling you, or what the culture's peddling, which is that hyper-productivity.
Yeah.
But actually your value is peace, connectedness.
Yeah. Patience.
Yeah. Creativity, slow pace. And if we're honest with ourselves and face into that, it can actually be a really tricky couple of years to turn your boat.
Yeah.
To steer it away from the life that you're in, which is that, the hamster wheel, the rat race, all the cliches. But and this is where courage comes into it again. Can you take that? Can you do it? Can you turn your boat? Can you choose to do it, even though it's not what is popular or not what's sold to you as being strong and powerful,
or even what an earlier version of you thought?
Yeah.
As well, like we said
exactly
earlier.
that. Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
And again, we equate it with failure or giving up. And that's the real question to ask ourselves is it failure or giving up? Is it failure or giving up by society standards? Because they actually don't matter. They don't matter. And if we stay moving, putting one foot in the front of the other in accordance with what we think society wants of us, we are never going to hit the point of happiness.
When we're on our deathbed, the local Chamber of Commerce don't drop in and go, great job.
Yeah.
So productive. Incredible work.
Thanks for working all those Saturdays. Yeah, I don't know why they're American. But...
No, you're like, what about my key relationships? Did I look after the people I love? That's what's going through your head.
Who's around my bed right now?
Yeah.
You know, as I'm 90 years old.
Where are my radio awards? Bring them into the room so I can see them.
Give them a chair for each.
Bring them closer. Give me my ratings for Q4. Where are they? I have so much happiness that you came in to talk to me. Thank you, Louise.
Thank you.
Just beautiful conversation as always.
Yeah, thank you. I loved it too. Thank you.